It's Waxing Lyrical, baby.
Hello, Waxers, and welcome to Waxing Lyrical Mains and Dutch. I'm your host Mains, and my colleague, who is one of them, who is a nerd but does like Sean McCoy. It's Mr. Neil Dutton. How are we, Neil?
Bon anniversaire.
Bon anniversaire, Neil. For those that don't know, the 15th of February 2001, Stadio Olimpico. Liverpool defeated Roma 2-0, 2 goals from then St Michael of Owen, now Class A Bell. And it was the first time we went to the pub and had drinks in the Coach and Horses in McGull.
I was just going to say, I think the way you were leading into that, people may have thought that we actually met in Stadio Olimpico.
Met in the romantic city of Rome. No, we didn't. But that's why we were there, to watch the Mighty Reds / Golden Navies play.
Yes, it was the Yellow and Blues.
Yellow and Blues, indeed. So we will get on to that a bit later on. We're going to talk about stuff that's happened since then or not happened since then, a few stats, a few other issues around what have happened between the 15th of February 2001 and the 15th of February 2017. It's the off-season, Dutton. But that doesn't mean we don't get great guests on. And we've got the absolutely brilliant Grweg Cosell on later to talk all things genius, which he obviously knows about. Bit of Brock Osweiler, bit of the Sean McCoy, bit of NFL draft, and see if he can trick us into enjoying the NFC East more as well.
Be nice if someone could.
Good luck to him. And then obviously Dutton will start it off, as we always do in the off-season, with Weird World. Now, I was trying to get music for this, but I failed miserably, although I have got something in mind, so it will come up hopefully next week. But Dutton, I mean, Weird World, since we last did Weird World, there's been Brexit and Donald Trump's president of the United States of America. Does it get much weirder than both of them?
No, I fear that we may have jumped the shark with this.
This is like these stories are now not as weird as they used to be. But let's start, and let's start in the UK. As a man who gets the tube more than you do see some weird sights on the tube. But have you ever seen the Final Frontier? Well, you have now. A group of possibly dedicated vans decided to go boldly where few had gone before by acting out a scene dressed in Star Trek-esque uniforms while riding the tube Wednesday. The actors got pseudo-serious tone of the series right, but the uniforms weren't exactly identical. Their tunics had the lightning bolt logo, not the traditional Starfleet insignia. Dutton, you and Tony would have been disgusted in this, obviously. And the patch was placed near the right-hand side, not the left. Do these people even understand Star Trek, Dutton? What the enterprising troupe lacked in elaborate special effects, though, made up for with their sheer spirit, such as when all the crew members brace for impact from laser cannons. Dutton, this sounds like something you would have done. Oh, okay, laser cannons, whatever. You and Mike Freeman, when we get Mike on, can talk about this debacle of incorrect spelling and incorrect uniforms. But have you ever? What's the weirdest thing you've ever seen on a train / the tube?
I saw someone talking on the tube once.
Oh, that's not that.
That struck me as a bit weird.
There's a weekday tube and a weekend tube. Like, the weekend tube is a much friendlier place. The weekday tube is a disaster. Basically, the apocalypse has happened, and if you talk to anyone, you will be hung, drawn, and quartered.
My kind of place.
Yeah, there's no interaction. It's get your headphones on, get off, go to your next destination.
It does remind me of the time it wasn't the tube, it was the Merseyrail service from Ormskirk to Liverpool that I was on. I had my headphones in my ears, but not plugged in. And some woman just jabbed me in the arm. Could you turn that down, please? I went, I'm not listening to anything. I went, I think you are. So I showed that my headphones were not actually connected to anything. Well, who puts headphones in and doesn't listen to music? Apparently my response of someone who doesn't want to talk to wankers like you, love, apparently that makes me rude.
Yeah, it makes you rude. Obviously, some woman screaming at you to switch music off that doesn't exist, doesn't. I was on the tube on Saturday. We saw a group of Eastern Europeans singing La Bamba in excellent Spanish accents, trying to get money. It was excellent. They didn't get money. That was probably the weirdest thing I've seen. Although pop-up Star Trek theatre does go past that, I believe.
Yeah, Britain's Got Talent awaits.
Exactly, Dutton, exactly. Next story. You had a car. You called it Ruben, if I remember correctly, after Ruben Hazel, former...
Correct.
Tranmere? Is that why he was named? Tell people why he was named Ruben Hazel, Dutton.
He was named Ruben after the second leg of the Coca-Cola or Rumbelows, wherever it was, the Worthington Cup semi-final, Tranmere against Bolton, where he was immense.
So Dutton has been in love with a car so much so that he named it. But I don't think he's been in love as much as this guy who's man with car sex fetish allegedly steals 4 cars for joyride. That's the headline, for joyride. For those who aren't watching the video like me, Dutton's shook his head and rolled his eyes. He's auto control.
It's a precursor to
yeah. A Michigan man awaiting trial on charges that he used a county-owned vehicle for sexual gratification has now been accused of stealing 4 cars for a joyride. Police don't believe he sexually gratified himself in a more recent incident. Jordan Haskins was jailed on Valentine's Day on 7 felony charges. On 7 felony charges related to a February 6th incident where he originally took the cars from an auto dealership in Thompson Township on some wild rides.
Some people. I'm speechless.
Right, so this is where it gets good, right? Haskins allegedly told police he likes to pull spark plug wires from cars to make the vehicles run rough, and says the sounds help him climax.
Weirdo. By a man.
Like, sexologist Susan Block, PhD, obviously.
Great title.
Susan Block, PhD. I think that show's on Fox next week. Told The Independent in an unrelated article that the vroom of an engine reminds men of their own libidos being revved up by this hot woman.
It really doesn't.
I don't really know where to
no,
say.
It really does not. Not now, not ever.
Cars are just cars, right? Like me, like I know you've named a car, but it gets me from A to B, and sometimes I make it break because of my poor looking after of them. But I don't love them.
It's like those things. There's Kate, some of the wonderful magazines that she reads. That's Dutch Kate, obviously, about people who fall in love with inanimate objects, like a woman who married a ship. Yes, I did say that. People are. How can I be polite about this? People are a problem.
The world would be a much better place if there was less people.
Mankind is nature's biggest mistake.
Yeah, I don't think there's any way around that. And
after Pop-Tarts, obviously.
That's not a food. I don't even know what it is. That and a pot noodle. What's a pot noodle? It's like cardboard and you put hot water in it.
It's
gross.
It's warm, runny gristle.
It's gross is what it is. There's so many ways to go with this next and final story, and that's just go with the headline. Atlanta Zoo loses Super Bowl bet, names cockroach after Tom Brady. You may be able to crush Atlanta's football team, but hands off one of its zoo's newest family members. The Atlanta Zoo on Monday introduced the world to one of its city's tiniest zoo babies, a tiny Madagascar hidden cockroach named Tom Brady. The zoo selected the name of New England star quarterback after losing a Super Bowl bet with Rhode Island's Roger Williams Park Zoo. According to the agreement, the losing zoo would have to name one of its babies after the winning team's quarterback. In a Facebook video, the tiny insect, no bigger than a thumbnail, is seen sharing a tank with at least 8 other cockroaches.
I mean, there is speculation that, in the event of a nuclear holocaust, only things that would survive would be cockroaches and Tom Brady. So I can imagine that this is a logical naming.
So basically, there'd just be Tom Brady and Tom Brady left on the planet.
Basically, yeah.
If someone could name an animal after you, Dalton, what animal would you want it to be?
Well, annoyingly, there is an advert where there is a creature with the name Neil, spoken over the voiceover for the advert with the lovely dulcet tones of Mr. Craig Cash, advertising sofas, and this Neil is a sloth. It's like, oh, Neil's forgot his digestives.
Fantastic. I'd like to be a penguin, Dalton. Don't know why. Pretty cool. Love a waddle. Like swimming.
I think it's just so you could literally just go wah every now and then.
Love Pingu as well. Yeah. So let all for Pingu.
Can I just say as well? Obviously, it's not on your sheet, but I did see a weird story. A woman in America, angered at her breakdown of her relationship with her partner, got her revenge by sending nudes to the man, her ex's son. Unfortunately, her ex's son was 17, so technically, in the state she was in, that makes her a sex offender.
The fact, I don't know where to go with that. Like, that you can drive before that you can get a gun before that, but you can't drink before that. Is it just? Can you imagine, like you get, first of all, who gets Post anymore? Like, Post is almost an exciting event. Kids like, oh, I've got Post, and you get some fat heifer who your dad used to bang's naked butt as a picture, and you're like, this is gross. Even at 17, like, it's not back in the day when it was like when we were 17, when the internet basically didn't exist. And the only way you could get any kind of gratification was to ask Gaz if he could lend one of his videos that he'd finished using.
Allegedly. I mean, obviously as well, I mean, this woman could be, from the outside, could be one of the most beautiful creatures on God's green earth, but the fact of the matter is you're looking at a picture of a woman that your dad's hit. So, that's just weird on a whole new level.
Yeah, it's awful. It's awful. As always in the off-season, we love Weird World because, we love making fun of people. So if you've got any stories, just whack them over. Twitter account is @waxing_lyrical. Or if you just want to give it to me or Dutton so we can surprise the other, I am @Mainsy7 and Neil is @ndutton13. So as we mentioned at the start of the show, I was on Twitter yesterday, and you get that, I follow a few Liverpool Football Club Twitter related accounts, and one of them is like, this happened 16 years ago today, and I'm like, that's Liverpool beating Roma in the Stadio Olimpico. That's the day I met Dutton. That's right. I put up with this absolute clown for 16 years. I had the opportunity to get out, and I decided to dump the other guy who I was friends with for Dutton. Wow. Let's all think about how much of a loser that guy must have been.
The sliding doors effect.
That is total sliding doors. Liverpool won that game 2-0. Although, ironically, Roma went on to win the league that year and had Totti, Batistuta and Montella in the team. And Cafu. Nearly as good as John Flanagan. Nearly. So, Dutton, I believe you got some interesting information on that date or since that date, so hit us with it.
Well, it's since that date, and basically involves the sport that we care enough about. So, obviously, that was in February. So, from the year 2000 season up to the end of the 2016 season, who has had the most passing yards in the NFL?
Peyton Manning.
It's Drew Brees, 66,111.
Oh, of course, 1990. Yeah, okay, yeah.
Who's had the most passing touchdowns?
So that's got to be Peyton Manning, surely.
Drew Brees, 465.
Wow, Tom.
Who has had the most rushing yards?
Since 2001.
2001.
This is an issue because, like,
you're an idiot.
Yeah, is it? I'm going to say someone like LaDainian Tomlinson.
13,684. LaDainian Tomlinson.
Get it.
The most rushing touchdowns.
I'm just going to say LaDainian Tomlinson again.
145. The most receptions.
Larry Fitzgerald. 1,125.
1,125. 1,125. 1,125. 1,125. 1,125. 1,125. 1,125. 1,125. 1,125. 1,125. 1,125. 1,125. 1,125. 1,125. 1,125. 1,125. 1,125. 1,125. 1,125. 1,125. 1,125. 1,125. 1,125. 1,125. 1,125. 1,125. 1,125. 1,125. 1,125. 1,125. 1,125. 1,125. 1,125. 1,125. 1,125. 1,125. 1,125. 1,125. 1,125. 1,125. 1,125. 1,125. 1,125. 1,125. 1,125. 1,125. 1,125. 1,125. 1,125. 1,125. 1,125. 1,125. 1,125. 1,125. 1,125. 1,125. 1,125. 1,125. 1,125. 1,125 Most receiving yards.
I don't know that one.
14,731, Steve Smith Sr.
Yeah. It's going to be him or someone like him or Bolden, wasn't it?
Most receiving touchdowns.
Is that Fitzgerald?
No. Randy Moss, 113.
Amazing.
And the most sacks.
It's 2001.
Mm-hmm.
This is Jared Allen.
It's Julius Peppers, 143 and a half.
Makes sense. That makes sense.
Changing sports. Who has won the most Ashes series?
Like as a player or as a team?
As teams.
Is it weirdly us?
It is indeed. We've won 5, Australia have won 4, but in terms of individual tests, it's 23-15 to Australia.
I was going to say we'll be getting spunked in individual tests. As every time we lose 5-0.
Oh yeah, it's 4-1 Australia, 4-1 Australia, 2-1 England, 5-0 Australia, 2-1 England, 3-1 England, 3-0 England, 5-0 Australia, 3-2 England.
Yeah.
Who has won the most Ryder Cups?
Europe.
Mm-hmm. The point total for that is Europe 120.5, US 103.5.
Have that, Yanks.
The last one. How many different teams have won the Premiership since 2001?
Arsenal, Man U, Man City, Chelsea, Leicester. That's all.
5, correct.
5, right?
United 7, Chelsea 4, Arsenal and City 2 apiece, and relegated Leicester 1.
It's crazy, absolute madness.
See, I was trying to look. I was trying to look for who scored the most runs and who's had the most Test wickets, but for some reason the stats guru page on Cricinfo was down, so this angered me.
Most runs in that period of time. When did Ponting start? He started mid-90s, so maybe it's not
96.
Ponting. It's going to be someone like Alistair Cook or Satcher, maybe.
Yeah, 2001. Cook's got 10,000 since 2006. I don't know how many Mahela might have had.
Yeah,
Jai Surya maybe, something like that.
Yeah.
I will find it out. I can tell people are absolutely dying to find out.
Exactly. Since 2001, Everton haven't won a trophy.
Bravo.
Thanks. That was the only thing I could think of to end the segment. I've enjoyed the 16 years, and I'm sure there'll be 16 more. Hopefully, doing podcasts and making money eventually. How about that?
Podcasts might be passé by then, so we might just be doing I don't know, drugs.
Excellent one. Excellent. On that somber / weird note, let's get back to the world of the NFL and get the absolutely magnificent Grweg Cosell on the phone to talk us through. Is Jimmy Garoppolo Brock Osweiler? Is LaShawn McCoy right, or does Greg side with the nerds and some scouting combine stuff? And joining us now on Waxing Lyrical, the brilliant Grweg Cosell, senior producer of NFL Matchup, senior producer of NFL Films for 37 years. Greg, how are we?
I'm doing great, gentlemen. I'm always good to be with you guys after the Super Bowl.
Yeah, it's good to be with you. I'm glad you can spare us a few minutes off your busy college tape to give us a bit of insight on a few questions we've got. So last year, Greg, Brock Osweiler made a ton of money after only a limited and frankly uneven performances. And the 2017 version of Brock Osweiler in that kind of mould will be Jimmy Garoppolo. Assuming he's traded from the Patriots, do you think his skill set will lend him to have success? Or do you think it's another case of a quarterback who never plays seemingly being more attractive than the ones that have got game tape?
You never know when a guy becomes a starting quarterback and he's the starter, but I think Garoppolo's skill set is better than Osweiler's. So assuming that Garoppolo goes to a team, and that's always the big factor. It's where he goes. Don't forget when he played those few games earlier in the 2016 season in New England before he unfortunately got hurt. He was playing on a very good team with an outstanding coaching staff, understanding what his strengths were, what his limitations at the time were. So much goes into a quarterback being able to step in and play for a new team with a new organization with likely a new offensive system, and then you get involved with the players around him on his side of the ball. You also have to then talk about the players that are on defense, what kind of defensive team they are. It's really a team structure. Now, do I think in the right situation he can be a very efficient and quality NFL quarterback? I do. But there's just so many variables. And it's funny you asked me about that because I've been watching so many college quarterbacks, and everybody wants to make lists, as you know. Who's your top quarterback? Who's number 2? Who's number 3? And I always try to tell people there's way too many variables to make lists like that, especially if you don't view any quarterback as being transcendent, where he has a skill set that would fit no matter where he would play. But if that's not the case, there are so many variables. I mean, look what happened this past year with Dak Prescott. And I think Dak Prescott, very few people probably believed he could step in as a starting quarterback week 1 as a rookie in the NFL and perform as he did. And maybe there were 1 or 2 people who felt that way, and more power to him. They did a great job. But he was in a tremendous situation where he had a dominant feature back, an offense built on the run game, and the best offensive line in football. So he was placed in a situation that really helped him be a successful player.
It does seem that most of the teams who are being linked with Garoppolo, and as we say, I mean, there's a report out today that I think it's Ed Verder doesn't think he will be traded. A lot of the teams who have been linked with Garoppolo, they don't seem, just from the outside looking in, they don't seem to be have that great offensive line, great running game, good receivers. Right. So that potentially is, as you say, that type of situation. You could probably see more of Garoppolo's weaknesses than his strengths. Would that be fair?
Well, I think you'd see a different player. You'd probably see a player that had to move around a lot. Don't forget, in New England, the style of offense they run now, obviously Tom Brady is not a quarterback that gets out of the pocket. He obviously has always had very good movement within the pocket, which is a different trait and skill set. But if Garoppolo played behind a poorer offensive line and a system that was not quick game based in many ways the way the Patriots offense is, then you might see him get out of the pocket more, make more plays that are outside of structure. I remember he did that earlier this season. I think it was the opening game against Arizona, where late in the game on a 3rd down play, he got out of the pocket and made a throw. It was a back-breaking type throw, I think in a 3rd and long situation, if memory serves me correctly. So I think he has the ability to do that. You'd probably see him have to try to do more of that with a team whose offensive line and system was not quite as good as the Patriots.
Moving in position, this week, LaShawn McCoy, should we say, expressed his displeasure with the nerds, quote-unquote, at Pro Football Focus. He didn't make their top 100 list, mainly due to his poor blocking. We saw a few weeks ago, obviously, in the Super Bowl, like, a running back not blocking a defender,
Correct.
It was something of an impact. Have we reached a stage in the NFL, or has it always been the case that, especially when a running back, no matter how good a ball carrier you are, no matter how good a receiver you are, if you cannot block, there's really no place for you on the field?
Well, I wouldn't say there's no place for you, but I think then what happens... Look, the better way to answer that is, as you guys know, what the game has evolved into over time is a game of situations. It's situational football based on down and distance, field location, those kinds of things, and then it's based on personnel packages on both sides of the ball. Obviously, defensively, we tend to talk about that a little bit more because they're specific defensive players, but certainly on the offensive side of the ball, that's true as well. So the game has evolved and morphed into that over time. So players to play in given situations need to have skill sets that are required in those situations. Now, if it's 1st and 10 or it's what we call normal down and distance, LaShawn McCoy is on the field and he's as good a runner as there is. I thought he had a phenomenal year this year running the football, and he's a terrific runner. We know that. But when you start getting into situations where the defense has the tactical advantage based on down and distance and personnel, then you start to think, okay, I'm going to need a back who's going to be able to block, who's going to be able to, one, recognize blitz, and two, execute versus blitz. That's when backs have to understand defensive fronts the same way that quarterbacks have to. And I don't want to sit here and say what's in Sean McCoy's head, because I don't know that. But obviously, if the new coaching staff feels that he can't do that, then he may not play in those situations.
Is the fact that LeSean was at Buffalo and under Rex and they ran a lot compared to some other teams?
Yep.
If he was in a different team, would he get as much? So he thinks he should make the top 100 because of the way he ran last year. Okay, that makes sense to me. But if do the PFF guys say, like, yeah, that's true, but in terms of the best running backs, you have to do three things now more than you ever had to, 25 years ago. The John Riggins of this world. His job was to run it because they ran it what seemed like every single play. LeSean's got three jobs. He's got to run the ball. He's excellent at that. Catch it out the backfield. He's excellent at that. He's got to block. He's not so good at that. And that's where, if you're going to be one of the best in the league or seen as one of the best in the league, you've got to be able to do that, especially now.
Well, I think that's a fair statement, and he's actually a very good receiver, so you'd want him on the field in those situations because he's not only a good receiver as a check down guy because of his run after catch, but I remember when he was in Philadelphia, he ran wheel routes, he ran some vertical type routes, and he was effective. So I think if you make it clear to him that he needs to do that to stay on the field, my guess is he'll do that, because I think he's a gifted player, and I think it's probably a case where if you make those expectations known, I would think that he would respond to that.
In a slightly related question, as you said, Greg, you're looking at college tape at the moment, and when in the UK, college football is on a little bit on one channel. They have a couple of games on a week, but it's nowhere near as big as, say, the NFL, and it's very difficult to explain to people. They're very different, especially on offense, in terms of what you do. When you watch it, it's very easy to say what players don't do. I haven't seen them do that. How difficult is it for executives, people like yourself, to try and go from they didn't do this to they could run, if it take wide receiver, a lot of wide receiver, the Baylor guys, just, the Corey Coleman's this world, they just run 9 mites every single play. That to then, now I need you to run a 10 yards hitch and an out and go and stuff like that. How easy is it to watch the tape and know that if someone can do that or can't, or do you just have to say, I haven't seen it, so I do not know?
Well, I think then it comes down to coaching and coaches looking at a player and saying that, hey, these are his traits, these are his attributes. I can work with that and I can coach him. So in other words, if you're speaking about a receiver and you have a veteran receiver coach, I'll give you an example, Al Saunders, who's now in Cleveland, who's been coaching in the NFL since, I think the late 70s, going back to the days of Air Coryell. He's one of the best receivers coaches in the NFL. So someone like Al Saunders can look at a player and say, I can teach him the subtle nuances of how to play wide receiver. Now, it might take a year or two, but I can do that over time. So I think when you look at players, you obviously look at traits, but what coaches also look at is scheme adaptability. So I think a lot of people are under the assumption that when you look at a player, he's going to play 65, 70 snaps a game. Coaches nowadays, I don't think in those terms. With the, obviously offensive linemen are different. They play pretty much every snap. But I think with skill position players, very often there's a sense of scheme adaptability and how they fit in a given scheme and how they fit in given situations. So you can have a player who's very valuable who plays half the snaps on offense if he's a receiver. Look at the third receivers or the fourth receivers. That's very often the case, but yet they're very critical pieces in offenses. So I think you look at traits, you look at attributes, you look at scheme adaptability, you look at how they fit your offense, you look at what their positives are, and I think the great coaches don't ask players to do things that they don't feel that they're able to do well.
I think it was Bruce. Sorry, Mez. It was just a couple of seasons ago. I think Bruce Arians. I think he. I'm sure I read he actually asked some of his running backs, some of his receivers, what plays do you like?
Right.
So then that way that he could put them in his offense, knowing that the players were not only comfortable running them, but almost happy to do so. Do you think that there's enough coaches who have enough nous to do that, or do some coaches maybe get a bit carried away with this is my scheme, this is how I run the offense?
Well, I think there's always a fine line, and I think Bruce is probably speaking about veteran players too. I don't think you're asking a rookie that to do that, or a second or third year player. It's one thing if he's talking about Larry Fitzgerald or certain players who then have some cachet and have performed well. I think you can do that. I think with veteran quarterbacks, I know that the offensive coordinator or the head coach, if he's an offensive guy, can ask a quarterback, okay, what do you like this week against this defense, and they can start with that and work off that. But I think that it can work both ways, and different coaches approach it differently. There are some coaches who are very wedded to their belief, their philosophy, their scheme, and they're going to run that no matter what. And there's other coaches who are a little more flexible. They still have a foundation, they still have a scheme, but they're willing to adjust based on their personnel or the willingness of their personnel to make suggestions as you suggested. So I think that can always work both ways.
As Paul continues to fail to acknowledge, this is an Eagles podcast. Did Carson Wentz show you enough things in 2016 to lead you to think that he can be a good NFL quarterback for years to come? Or did you see enough things that you didn't like that made you think that maybe the 2016 Carson Wentz is as good as he's going to be?
No, I don't think that's the case. I would say the former would be the way I think. I think he showed quite a bit this year. You have to remember one thing. This was a team that had a week-to-week run game, no consistency with the run game. As far as weapons on the perimeter, you'd have to say that the Eagles' weapons were probably bottom third for sure in the NFL in terms of talent and skill sets. So he was working not with a full deck, so to speak. So I think that what he showed under those situations, and when you watch, and I watched every game on tape, so you saw big-time NFL throws, you saw the movement, you saw the mental part of the game. They gave him a lot to do. He made some specific plays this year where he totally recognized defenses and made adjustments and audibles at the line of scrimmage. So he showed an awful lot this year. So now it's up to the Eagles as an organization to surround him, particularly at the wide receiver position, with better players.
So with Wentz in Philadelphia and Dak, as you mentioned earlier, in Dallas, Washington are stuck between, well, they're not stuck between a rock and a hard place. They're stuck between 24 million and 120 million, I guess, in terms of franchise tag or long term deal for Kirk Cousins. If the franchise tag, he'll probably be gone next year. In terms of the Giants, Eli Manning struggled last year. I think that's fair to say. From what you saw from the tape, is that something that can be rectified, or are we seeing a similar wall to what Peyton slammed into at the end of his career?
Well, Eli was not hurt. I don't think he played particularly well. I think that he played behind an offensive line that for the most part wasn't very good. They don't have a consistent run game either, but he did not play well individually. He's going to have to play better this year. Now, you never know when players get older if that can happen or if not, but obviously he's going to be their starting quarterback this year. Whether they believe in this draft that they need to draft a quarterback, I guess we're going to find out, but he's clearly going to have to play better. Now, there was no reported injury, so it was just not a good season for him, and we'll see what 2017 brings. But yes, he'll have to play better, or the Giants would certainly they may begin the process in this draft. We'll have to wait and see on that.
I mean, there are a few quarterbacks of a similar vintage, we say, of Eli, that the teams have been quite frank that maybe this is the year they need to start looking for a replacement. We've seen the Steelers have acknowledged that they can't guarantee that Ben Roethlisberger is going to be here forever. The Cardinals have said that they need to start looking for their long-term quarterback. It's not easy though, is it? I mean, obviously these are good teams, so there's a good chance that they're going to really have to try and find a diamond in the rough to take over from Ben Roethlisberger or from Carson Palmer, because the chances are they're not going to be picking in the top 3 or 4 next year.
No, and it's funny because quarterbacks tend to go high. Based on my study up to this point of quarterbacks, this is a year where these quarterbacks probably would be best suited to be in a situation where they watched behind a Carson Palmer, a Phillip Rivers, a Ben Roethlisberger. It would make sense for that to be the case. But depending on who drafts them and where they're drafted, as we know, that may not happen. Obviously, if a team like San Francisco chooses to draft a quarterback number 2 in the draft, Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch will be doing that to play that quarterback because they don't really have one that I imagine they feel comfortable with on the roster right now, because Colin Kaepernick is a free agent. I don't believe he's a fit anyway in Kyle Shanahan's system, but that would best serve the quarterbacks in this given draft. But as we know, when quarterbacks are drafted high, assuming they are, then quarterbacks that are drafted high tend to play.
Obviously, we know that you'll be doing regular spots with Ross Tucker this off season, as you do during the rest of the season. Where else can people find any things that you've written or things that you'll be saying on podcasts?
Well, I do a column for Yahoo Sports. I'll probably pick that up again next week when we start doing some of the draft stuff. I'm trying to figure out, because I take such copious notes when I watch all these college players, I'm debating how I want to get all this stuff out there, because it's hard to do, as you know, on radio interviews, because when you say one thing, the way I do this, there's strengths, there's weaknesses, there's transition, I have detailed notes, and when you make one comment, like let's say you say that you don't like something about a player, then immediately, as you know, people think that means you hate the player, and nothing could be further from the truth. All college players are prospects, so they all have strengths, they all have weaknesses, they all have ways in which they may or may not transition to the league, and it's a little more detailed and nuanced than one line. So I'm trying to figure out the best way to get all my material out, but Yahoo Sports, I will be doing regular columns for them leading up to the draft.
Greg, thanks a lot for your time. We know how busy you are, and we'll let you get back to some college game film.
Well, guys, I always enjoy being with you. I appreciate you having me.
Well done. That was a brilliant Grweg Cosell there. As always, just a fountain of knowledge and information.
It's like Andrew Brandt and other guests that we basically have stole from Ross Tucker. You just get the feeling that, after speaking to him for about 5 minutes, you just feel cleverer about certain topics. I mean, the idea as well that, veteran players saying, I quite like doing this. It just took me back to, there's a book by John Feinstein called Next Man Up. It's the story of the 2004 Baltimore Ravens. It's a bit like Bringing the Heat, Collision Low Crosses. It was a man who stayed with a team for the year, and they had Kyle Boller at quarterback, and he basically said to the offensive coordinator, Matt Cavanaugh, I like these plays. Can we do them, please? And Matt Cavanaugh was a bit taken aback, because it's just like, well, yeah, but why did you wait till now to tell us this? So it's a very good book, featuring, it's got some good stories, some good insights, but I digress. It's just, Greg watches more game film than any other sane human on the planet, I would imagine. So to get his insight on matters like this that we've been arguing about, behind closed doors, this isn't a perfect marriage, we've been arguing about, to get his insight, I think, just goes to prove that I was right.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I think we'll let the listeners of our group message discuss who was right on the Sean McCoy. Although I was very. I mean, if we go back to the Osweiler Garoppolo thing, the issue that Garoppolo is going to have is, I think that Greg kind of went round the houses on trying to say this, is that the teams that want Jimmy Garoppolo are crap. Like, he's not going to get picked up by the New England Patriots. Do you know what I mean? So he's going to be stuck in a situation in, a Cleveland, a San Francisco, those type of places, and they stink. So he hasn't got the personnel around him, and that may mean that he looks rubbish, but it may not be anything to do with him being rubbish.
Yeah, it's going to be a case of literally a team's going to have to bring him in, and this is where we say about, as Greg said, about scheme adaptability. There's no point bringing him in and expecting him to, 7-set drops, bombing it downfield, because the chances are, A, they're not going to have the receivers to do that. B, they're not going to have the offensive line to protect him for that long. And C, he's never done it before, so there's no point.
Exactly, and hopefully we talked NFC's quarterbacks, and I mentioned Kirk Cousins, and hopefully we'll stay like that for as long as humanly possible.
I'll drink to that.
That's the end of the show. We'll be back. If you got any weird words, as we said, send them to @waxing_lyrical. If you like the show, rate and review on iTunes. We're available on there, Google Play, Spreaker, SoundCloud, all the places. Pornhub, not available on Pornhub. That's not me. It's just not. Any final words, Dalton?
No, I say it's going to be a long off season, but we'll get through it together.
We will do, Dalton, and what we'll probably end up doing is staying a little weird.